Hi, everyone. I'm like really excited today. Welcome to the seventh Inner Fire Women interview. I am so excited for this session and for our guest today. She is a magical being and a friend of mine who uses tarot, astrology, and the moon cycles, her intuition, her femininity, and her fairy-like being to wrap it all up and offer it as a gift to the world. And today we're going to learn about her special twist on how she links them all together and uses them in her own life and also to help her clients. So her name is Luna Rose, and I'd like to welcome her onto the screen. Hi, Luna.
Hey, Mel.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm so glad we're doing this together. It's really, thank you. Thank you for being willing to show up and be interviewed. It's quite a big thing, so thank you for that.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're very welcome. I'm excited about this. I'm excited about what we're going to discover and learn about tarot, astrology, moon cycles, and you. And I mean, it's a world that I'm fascinated with and also have so many questions about because I don't take the time to learn about it. So to have you, who's so passionate and who really has a way of grounding it, I think it's going to be a really special interview. So we decided to talk about the medicine of the tarot, and just to let in on our viewers, let in on our process when we thought of the subtitle. For me, it came up demystifying the airy-fairy, because I feel like there's so much, up in the air, floating around tarot and astrology, and there's this misconception, maybe we could say it that way, about it being non-tangible or the airy-fairy, and yet when we had this discussion, if you want to share about what that came up, what that brought up for you, this, using the airy-fairy. Because it wasn't easy, right? There was something about it was like, I don't know. I don't want to diss the airy-fairy.
Exactly. So, there is that misconception that it's all floating up in the air. And, often with this kind of, guidance where you'll get these, these ideas and these concepts. And it's like, but how can I bring that down? So there's totally the airy-fairy aspect, and I embrace that, and I'm such a fairy. But it really is something that you can embody. It really is something that you can integrate, and I've seen it with myself first and foremost, and also with my clients, where the themes that come up and the wisdom and the guidance that the different archetypes in the tarot and astrology, of course, and in conjunction, like we said, with the moon cycles, that we can really put into place practices, and we can really benefit from that in a very practical way. That's why, like we were discussing, my first webcast is going to be on the embodied tarot, because there is so much that we can apply actually in our lives and see actual tangible results.
Yes. Well, I had the experience with you when we had our reading, when you did a reading for me. It really blew me away how it was something that I could use then to, like, actions came out of it, concrete actions and understandings and insights, and it was really embodied, and I was pleasantly surprised. Definitely. So tell us more about your story, like how it came about that you decided to offer this, and it's now your business. I mean, Luna Rose Alchemy, it's what you offer. So tell us more about it.
Yeah, so that's actually my most latest offer. I have a bunch before that, of course, that kind of naturally led into this. And yeah, the latest offer, like you said, it's tarot online. I had a bit of resistance a while back to doing it online, but as soon as I started, I saw how it really translates. I can really connect to the people and deliver very powerful readings online, because energy is just, it just is. So we're always connected. And so, yeah, I came about it. I mean, I've always kind of been fascinated with the human psyche. I went into psychology in university. So yeah, it's a very big interest of mine to begin with, but also the occult. Like I've always been into witchy stuff and the unseen and all that mystical, magical stuff. But I'm also very like practical, you know. So my son's in Virgo, so everyone knows that we're pretty practical beings. So yeah, so bridging that gap has really, really helped me in my own spiritual practice. And so it was mostly, yeah, in the last 2 or 3 years, I had been developing my practice of sound therapy. And then I took a course finally in tarot to be able to really dive in and really have more intuitive reading, because yeah, I mean, it's nice, we do the spread and then we look at the book and read it, but I really wanted to be able to read it by just looking at it. And so I took 1 or 2 workshops with that, and then the second one just poof, it totally clicked, and ça débloqué, it unlocked something for me. So then I started using that in my sound therapy sessions, which added a whole new layer to that treatment. And then I started just doing just tarot, like by donation at a local tea shop, and I was just surprised how powerful it was on its own even. And so yeah, it was just a natural progression, you know. I mean, with this you know, kind of restrictions we're living in right now, the online thing was kind of a natural progression of my practice and my offerings.
Wow. I find that so, it was like the discovery for you, to that step-by-step discovery of finding out its power, finding out how it is, you know, like a tangible and exchangeable, like yeah, the way they explain it, I can sense it, that it became um, clear to you that this was a tool that you could use to support others. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And so for those out there who aren't quite sure what it is, what is tarot? Like, what does it
Yeah.
mean? What does it include? I mean, we know it's cards, you know, but there's these, you know, you spoke of like arcanas when we did our session. And yeah, could you speak more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So for those who don't know, tarot, yeah, it's a system. It's a system of archetypes, and essentially it's the hero's journey in the major arcana, which are the big main cards. There's 22 of them, but oftentimes they say 21 because the fool is number 0, and it's the fool's journey throughout his life. So each of the archetypes in the major arcana represent a different phase of development in our lives, from example like childhood and discovering things, to teenagehood and refining things, to later on in the more higher spiritual concepts. So it's essentially just, yeah, a system where we can see all the different places that we go in our lives. Like we all have moments with the death card where we have to let things go, for example, and we're in Scorpio season, so this is a moment of that. And so we can see how, yeah, we all go through these phases, we all go, and then what is the lesson for us at that moment in time? So there's general themes, and then there's specific lessons depending on where we are in our lives. And then we have the minor arcana, which consist of 56 cards in my deck, and most. So I use the Aleister Crowley deck. And so it's numbers 1 to 10 in each suit. So the different suits are like represented in the elements as well. So you'll have swords for air, for example, and water for cups. And so it's talking about the physical, emotional, mental and physical. I said physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual plane. Yeah, the 4 planes. and then we'll have the 4 court cards. So we'll have like the princess, the prince, the queen, and the knight. So those are different like personality types, for example. So each of them have their own aspects. And then, yeah, the minor arcana shows us as well, like from the 1 to 10, all the different places that we can be mentally, all the different places we can be psychologically. And so in a reading, we'll pull cards and it'll help us kind of like get a perspective on where we are at that moment in time and see what is feeding us, what is nourishing us, what is challenging us, and then do a kind of a coherent reading and extract what it is that we need to learn right now, what it is that we can be applying to move through this phase of our life, and in a more graceful and peaceful way, in a more welcoming way, and in a way that we can really get the wisdom of this moment in time, because it's all about learning. Like, we're always continuously learning. And so this helps us to get a bigger perspective on that, and then make a decision, not from like being submerged in things, but from an overlook that helps us to navigate it in a way that's intentional and empowering.
Wow. I love it. I love it. That's very clear and exciting. I'm like curious. I'm like, oh, where am I now in my development? You know, how incredible. And if someone who's starting off would like to get a deck, like where do you have one in mind that you would suggest as a beginner's?
Yeah. Well, it so depends on the person. Like for me, I really enjoy intuitively reading, and I'm really into the imagery and the symbolism, as that is the language of the subconscious and the psyche. So for me, I tried with the Tarot de Marseille, but it didn't quite stick. My first deck was actually the Osho Zen Tarot. And that was a really interesting deck as well. It's very shorter and clear messages, and it's very much based on the present moment. So I enjoyed that aspect of it. But yeah, I'm totally a fan of Aleister Crowley, and it could be an interesting starting point. It could be an interesting, yeah, exploration. Obviously, I'm a little partial to it. And the Aleister Crowley has a very rich imagery, so it really depends on your take on it. For me, I love just playing around in all the different aspects and the energy. But one that people really, really like, and that I've been recommended as well, is the Rider-Waite. Rider-Waite is very popular, and that's a little bit more simple. So it might be also a good place to begin.
Amazing. So it sounds to me like you tried a deck and then it didn't really resonate with you, so you tried another one. So it might take someone who's starting off to try a few and then to see what speaks to them if they want to. Is that what I'm hearing? Like that would be the best.
I would definitely say, yeah, to check out the imagery before. There's all kinds of pictures online, or like in the there's like a card shop in town in Montreal that you can just flip through. And yeah, so for me, it's important that the imagery speaks to you, that you can really get a feel for the card by looking at it. Because if you go in a little more traditional way, then you'd have to really know what those are. So it's a little bit more intellectual, or a little bit more of a study. And if that's your thing, then go for it. But for me, it really is so much about, like, if I just look at it, I can feel for it by the way that they're looking, or the colors that are in the card, for example, with the Crowley deck. But the Rider-Waite does have those aspects to it. They do have like imagery that suggests different feelings that come up with the imagery. So it does give direction. And actually, one of my friends said she really enjoys that one because it's more clear. Whereas the Crowley, she can get lost in all the different aspects. So it really is what speaks to you. I would definitely say go with what speaks to you, and go with, yeah, if it's clarity and like a simple thing you're looking for, or if it's like, if you love getting inspired by all kinds of different forms and colors, it really depends on you. Yeah.
Amazing. And So I have a list that you gave me of tarot and oracle cards that our viewers could go through as suggestions. Can you tell us more about what our oracle cards are? Because they're not the same as tarot, right?
Exactly. So a lot of people are a little confused when they ask me, but yeah, so the tarot, it's really universal archetype. So it's pretty much the same in all the decks, with a little tweaks from here and there of different people's interpretations. But it's, essentially, they are universal archetypes. Whereas when you get into the oracle card decks, it really is like themed. So for example, one of my favorites is the Spirit Animal Oracle. And that one is a little easier to tap into because, yeah, like when you see an animal like the stag, for example, like, you know, it's about like honor and humility and just the way that they stand. And so it really is on the different themes. It'll give you, yeah, like messages according to that. And those could be used as like, yeah, supportive inspirations of the day. People mostly pick it as inspiration of the day. Or I like also to pick it for my clients in a reading to just support the reading, or just be like, oh, let's see what like animals are accompanying you today, or, you know, it gives like a little flavor. And oftentimes the oracle card will just kind of like re-highlight everything that was, or like give you like the takeaway message of the whole tarot session, which that happens pretty much all the time, of course, because magic. And yeah, so I gave you a couple of them. There's like the Divine Feminine Oracle that talks about different archetypes of divine feminine. There's the Work Your Light Oracle that I put in there too, and that's very high vibration cards. And the Moonology deck that you have as well, that talks about the moon cycles. So you'll flip and you'll pick and you'll actually get to know the moon cycles in that one. So that's really neat.
Oh, it is so neat. I'm having such a hoot learning about it. It's blowing my mind. All the phases of the moon and the different, like, the eclipses, and like what they all mean, the energy that they hold and signify. And I'm like, it's a whole new world. And then to try to link it, well, to try to link it to yeah, make those connections between what I'm experiencing, especially as a woman, have my own cycle, like, wow, it is, my perception of life is shifting because of it. It's yeah, and the way that I take care of myself is changing because of it.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's something that you brought also in our, when you did a reading for me, was to look at my life differently, from a different angle. And yeah, the magic of it, really, it's so powerful. So I put the list that you gave me, I put it in the comments for our community to see. And I would love to know, because there are many people out there who do tarot readings and astrology and speak about the moon. What do you offer that is unique to you?
That's a really good question. It's usually, yeah, so I guess I'm just really informed by everything else that I've kind of studied. So I've studied in massage therapy, I've studied in yoga and yoga therapeutics and restorative yoga nidra. I've studied in sound therapy and energy healing and all this kind of stuff. So I always feel like each of my treatments is all informed by everything else that I've studied and that I've practiced. And yeah, my unique flavor, I guess, is, well, the Queen of Swords is one of the cards that I really relate to. And so she's very much about, yeah, it's very connected to Virgo energy as well. It's really about how the mental, how beliefs, thoughts, perceptions, perspectives informs our emotional states. So that's been a journey for me since the beginning. And so for me, I feel like that's the mode that I get in when I give a reading. So I can really sense where people's thoughts, beliefs, patterns, it's something that I can kind of see or kind of feel. So I use that. Also, I have a very easy time to feel people in general. So to tap into their energy field in a kinesthetic way. It's called clairsentience. So I use these different things like in the psyche, in the subconscious, from my understandings over time about spiritual practice and psychic knots and psychic unmeshing, and there's all these kinds of aspects that I bring to it, and it's always informed by the moon cycles, informed by astrology, and informed by the archetypes in astrology and tarot, and how that all relates. So yeah, I guess you can kind of like give me feedback if that's the impression you got. But yeah.
I really, I think, wow, this is so powerful. My necklace just came apart. Don't know how that happened. Yeah, our reading was like just, it was very unique to me. I had, a few readings, but there was something, it seemed like you were getting a lot of information.
Yeah, that part.
Yeah, so that was something for me. I was like, wow, there's so much detail, so much information coming through. And how you did connected to different sort of aspects. I don't know quite how to put it into words, but yeah.
I could.
Yeah, go.
Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up, because I'm just so in it that it's hard to see from my perspective because it's just innate. So yes, of course. So the channeling thing that actually unlocked for me and started when I started with sound therapy. So I've always been really sensitive. And so, but I always felt like connected to the other side. And so, sound really unlocked that for me. It really opened me up to hearing my guides, hearing people who've passed, and listening to the messages that come through. I noticed that I was channeling messages from Arcturians, messages from a lot of different sources that are beyond my own comprehension. So it's not really me all the time. Actually, it's not me. it is my opportunity to get out of my way to become a channel to deliver the messages. So I've understood myself as a channel to deliver messages, and tarot is a beautiful structure and context to help refine the message that wants to come through. Oftentimes it'll just come through like that, but this is like the tarot is particularly powerful to have that supportive structure to allow those things to come through. And yeah, the connections, that's Mercury, baby. I'm like a Virgo Gemini moon. So Mercury is my big planet. It's all about that, all about like the messenger. It's tied to Hermes, right? And so it's all about communication. So if you were in my brain, you would understand how much processing goes on there. And those close to me understand how much once that unlocks, that it can just keep going forever. So it really is something for me that I can see all the connections and I can understand, and I just pick up on like the map of it, if you will. So it's really like I see, okay, now I know how all of this relates, and I can like kind of clear it up like in the mental space. So that's another Virgo thing of being able to really get clear, to really be able to like order it in neat and tidy little ways. And then once you have that clarity, it's so much easier to move forward, because that's what it is, you know? So the way that I understand it is we get psychic knots and blocks where things get kind of like locked together, right? So I relate that to my work in massage therapy and yoga. So essentially, energy just flows, you know, energy flows naturally, and information and guidance and all of this. So it's just a matter of like, say, oh, I didn't quite resolve this here. Oh, I didn't quite. And then it creates these tensions in our bodies and in our energetic bodies and whatnot. And so it's like it throws us off our center, if you're thinking like a center channel. And if we are able to like take that away and clear that up and release those tensions, then the energy is just like flowing clearly, and we're just, you know, on our path and in alignment. So essentially that's what the work is for me. So it relates to massage and yoga through the body. It relates like yoga and sound through energetic systems, and it's all related. It's just different layers of our existence. So yeah, that's I think that pretty much sums that up.
That's, I find it, you know, I'm listening to you explain, and everything you're saying is so captivating. And also another thing that I'm noticing is that how astrology is a way to, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but to understand yourself much better, and also to know your strengths, because you're naming like the Virgo, you're naming the Mercury, you're naming, and even though I don't really know what it all means in great detail, the fact that you're like, oh, well, Virgo has this in it, so therefore I have, and it's so refreshing, because there's this confidence that comes in, like I am, you know, my sun is in Virgo, therefore this is what I have access to, and there's no like ego involved, there's no, it's just like, that's, yeah, that's my superpower, because that's my like astrology, you know. I love that. I really do. I want to know more about that. So do you find
Yeah.
that that's true for you? Like, do you find that it helps you to feel more confident about who you are?
Well, I'll be honest, when I came into it, yeah, like I had so much skepticism. Like, it's funny, I'm like this airy-fairy girl, but I have skepticism so much. So when I first got interested in astrology, it was like a while back, and I said, you know what, if anything, it's an opportunity to reflect upon self. So like, you know, we read about, you know, the different signs and be like, does that relate to you? Do you connect with that? And so if anything, I said to myself, it's a way of, yeah, self-reflection. And so is tarot. It's a self-reflective tool. Self-reflective tool. And so, yeah, but then with over time, I started getting deeper into the astrology. So you have your birth chart, which, so each of the planets have a sign that they were in when you were born. And while I'm not saying like that locks you in and you're stuck, like, you know, not in that way, but I see it as like that influences you. So you have these energetic influences. And if you see, I'm not an astrologer, but if you see an astrologer, they'd be able to work up your birth chart, and there's so many layers of it. There's aspects, there's houses, there's like, you go a little further and it's a little deeper and a little bit, so there's like really a lot going on there. So I won't get into that. But yeah, it's also about the relationship of the different planets and the house. So it's really this whole map of how all those aspects interact together, right? So, and then recently, I've been following this fantastic woman, Sarah Verba. She does tarot and astrology YouTube videos. Highly, highly recommend her. I've been following her for at least a year. And that's when I really started getting into it. Because each season really has a particular flavor to it. Each, like we were just in Scorpio season, like I said. So there really was this theme of death and rebirth, and like that the sign of Scorpio is in, and truth telling, and like all that stuff. So yeah, I've noticed that, especially with the sun, especially with the different seasons. So I also follow the Wheel of Eight, the sabbats of like, yeah, the equinoxes, the solstices. So depending on where we are in the season, depending on the solar month we're in, depending on what the sign the moon is in too. And like you said, the moon phases. So yeah, the different archetypes in the astrology have a wealth of information in them, have a wealth of themes that come with it. And so we can see like, okay, now the sun, we're going to be actually going right into Sagittarius season. So we're going from Scorpio to Sagittarius season. And Scorpio is all about death and rebirth. And then we're going to be going into Sagittarius, which is very much about like a higher perspective and the bigger picture, you know? So taking what we learned from like letting go of what no longer serves, and then coming out with like a bigger eagle-eyed view of, okay, now what from here, you know? So it's really interesting to see how you are in different seasons. And then also with the different archetypes of astrology, there'll be some that you love that energy and it's so nice. Like every time we get into Taurus season, I know you're a Taurus, I love it. It's so Venusian and like like pleasure and like I just always want at like bath sensual, just it's such beautiful energy. I love it. So but then we'll get into certain seasons that you're like, ooh, oh, this one I don't quite judge. So it's like it also gives you the opportunity of like, okay, like so I have a hard time with these aspects of this, you know, this archetype. So how can I, you know, learn to ride those waves in a way that's more beneficial to me? Or it's like, for example, when Gemini season comes around, my brain is just crazy. So I know like, okay, I'm going to need to do more grounding practices at this time of the year. I'm going to need to say no to certain like social outings or things like that, because I will be way too stimulated. That's not good for me. So it's an interesting, yeah, way of working with yourself and respecting exactly like the more you know about yourself, self-knowledge, the easier it is to, yeah, ride those waves and those cycles.
I'm really loving this, and I'm noticing that the more that I'm learning about astrology and what season we're in, the more that I'm able to accept what's happening. Because you know, when we were challenged with the Scorpio season of death and truth telling, you know, there's a lot of things going on in my relationship. There's a lot of things going, and I'm like, God, what's happening? Why is this thing like going out of whack all of a sudden? You know, but then when I'm here, when I watch videos, you know, your videos of other people who talk about the moon, let's say, like, or with the season that we're in, all of a sudden I'm like, okay. So it's bringing this up so that I can integrate it, look at it, shine light on it. It's like, whew, okay, all right, we'll get through this. This is not going to be forever, number one. Like, you know, the season will change. Something else will come up. Thank goodness. But also, yeah, it's accepting the season that we're in and knowing that, yeah, that's okay, and that's where we're at and where we're supposed to be. So as you're talking about it, I'm letting that in, because I'm like, oh, it's reassuring when everything's going.
It really is. Like, you know, around the new moon, we'll always feel a little bit more tender. Around the full moon, things will be really like up in our face. So yeah, I've had it many times in the past where I'm like, I'm like crying, and then I'm like angry, and then like and I'm like, what is going on? I like look at the calendar, and I'm like, oh right, okay, this will pass in like a day. It's just the moon, you know. So yeah, it does help. It does help to have that perspective and to like have that kind of reality check moment where, oh, okay, so it's just this, you know, like it's not forever. Yeah, not just me.
No, and it's for our, you know, I mean, I guess looking at it like it's for our well-being. It's bringing up whatever needs to come up to be, like I said before, seen and integrated. And so it's in some ways a gift, even though it doesn't feel good. Yeah. You know, one thing that I noticed for myself is that I'm excited about all this astrology, the moon, like it just it gets me. But it's so much information, and there's so little time to absorb it all into, like you said, like astrology. Once you start going into, you know, looking at your chart and all the, it's like layer, and it just keeps going down into, you know, really specific things. So I'm noticing for myself, I suppose it's about choosing one medium to start with as a support system and learning that one, and then layering it. Is that how you would suggest to go, or would it be to take a little bit out of everything, or how would you?
It really is kind of like individual, you know. It's up to you and your you know, how much time you have to spend on it. But like I said, there are people out there like Sarah Verba who really each month for each sign, she gives like a little 15-20 minute video saying like, okay, this is like the energies that you're going to be working with for the month. And so for me, that's a perfect way to get into it. It's just like 20 minutes once a month. And then she does like a new moon and a full moon video as well, about the same amount of time, free on YouTube. I'm on her Patreon, which is an even deeper dive. That's a whole other thing, which I recommend if you're interested. But yeah, just having those little like check-in points. And that's exactly what I love about my practice is like, it gives you this kind of like check-in point. Each new moon, okay, let's see, let's check in of what's going on here. Each full moon, okay, let's check in what's going on here. And so that's kind of how I've structured my videos as well, like new moon, full moon, and then I'll have oracle card readings at the half moons, like so in between. So it's just a moment, it's just like getting into the habit of having those moments of checking in and listening to someone who you resonate with, you know, like for me it's Sarah Verba, for you, like there's a bunch of others out there. But yeah, so just like following someone who resonates with you consistently on these kind of things, and then it just sinks in over time. It's a very like organic way of doing it. You don't have to go like crazy and just like, I need to learn all the, or you can do that if that's what you want to do. But you know, like for me, it's been a natural progression over time, and that way you can integrate it, you know, at least for me, diving in and getting really submerged in something is one way, and that works for some people, but for me, I'm slow and I take time to process and integrate. So for me, integrating it into my like routine, into my monthly, into my weekly, into my, you know, for me that helps to sink in. And then you'll hear them say, I recommend following one person, like one person consistently, or maybe two, but that way, like their way of speaking and their way of seeing the cards and their way of interpreting the astrology signs, like it gets repeated, so it sinks in, you know, over time. So yeah, that's how I'd recommend doing it.
Interesting. I find that, you know, I really loved our readings. So for me, like your videos that bring the special quality of you, you know, would be something I would. So I'm just gonna keep watching you. You're gonna inform me so that I can then integrate it. That's wonderful. And do you believe that that tarot cards, oracle cards, following the moon cycles, etc., can help us develop our intuition?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there are particular cards in the deck that speak more to that, but yeah, in general, I would say for sure. I mean, over time, I've developed quite a relationship with the deck to the point where I'm talking with someone and a card will come up and then I'll pull that card in our reading, you know, like it's just, it gets to that point, you know, all of us have intuitive abilities, and it really depends on, you know, how much you trust that and how much you build on that trust. So building on the trust by I use a pendulum. Actually, my pendulum recently ran away from me, so I'm using my necklace. But yeah, so there's different methods like that where you just make these micro decisions based on that feeling, you know. And then the more that you pay attention to that, the more you will tune into it. So yeah, the cards is also another way of doing that. It's like, oh, I'm feeling like this. Let's check the cards out, and oftentimes they're just going to reflect exactly what you're thinking. You know, the thing that you're like, is it that? Ooh, let me just, you know, I don't want it to be that. And then it'll be that. And just saying, when you're going to start working with the deck, you'll probably pick the same cards like 80% of the time, like, because that's what we're working with at that moment. And it's like, oh, no, you're not done with that yet. You're still learning that now. So it's an interesting thing, because then it becomes just like a mirror, you know? So the tarot, it's a mirror. It's a mirror into our soul. It's just going to reflect exactly what it is that we need to hear at that moment, exactly what we already know, really, you know. So it's a helpful tool. It's a helpful reflective mirror tool, and astrology as well, right? So it's like I started picking up on, oh, wait a minute, I am feeling really different this month, like this solar month as opposed to that solar month, and I'm really noticing the differences. I'm journaling and I'm really noticing, like, oh, you know what, when the moon's in Virgo, I'm like up late at night just like in a craze of like tidying things and organizing things, and I'm like, what am I doing? And then I'm like, all right, the moon's in Virgo, that's what's up. So yeah, it helps you to just, by reflection, by mirroring, by getting in contact with that, it helps tap into our intuition, for sure.
So exciting. I'm like super excited about all this, knowing more and following you. And so you've prepared a reading. You did a reading for today, is that correct? And you'd like to share that with us?
Well, what I did was I pulled out the cards of the archetypes that were that are present right now for us. So I pulled out the Death card, which is related to Scorpio, which is the solar season that we're in still, but we're going right over to Sagittarius season. The moon right now is in Aquarius, which is related to the star card. So each of the major arcana has a planet or an astrological sign that it's linked to. And then our last card is called Art in my deck, but Temperance in other decks. And that's related to Sagittarius, and that's the season we're going into. So we can just take a quick little look at those cards, and I'll tell you
Yeah,
a couple aspects of them.
here we go. You sent them to me. Yeah, there you are.
Yeah, so these are the cards that are speaking right now. So as I mentioned several times, I'll be like a broken record, that we're in the end of Scorpio season. So as we have seen, and if you check out my other videos, at the full moon was kind of the peak of all the things that had to be illuminated in us with the Scorpio season. So we see that it's related to death. So death, not in the physical death, but death in a symbolic death. So death of things that are not serving you, whether it be thoughts, different kind of patterns that you're repeating. Like I can volunteer some information about myself. So for example, I got face to face with a lot of destructive patterns that I was having. So the little, scared little child that wanted to curl up in a ball, I saw her reacting. I saw like the teenage rebel that was like, no, like screw this, screw that. I don't want to do anything. I saw like the critical parent, like all of my, patterns of sabotage like came up at the illumination of the full moon in Scorpio season. And so we use that as a way to like acknowledge what needs to die, and then let it in the waning phase. So as we're going down into the new moon, let those patterns kind of fizzle away. And then when we go to the new moon, it's a time to plant a seed. So at that new moon, it was like, okay, so what are the patterns that I want to feed? What are the new, the new patterns I want to feed that will help me come out of, or maybe even like a way of responding to those old patterns that still live in me that I would like, that it's no longer serving me. Like all those patterns at some point in my life or at some point in our lives serve us. That's why we develop them. They're like protective mechanisms, right? So anyway, it could be related not just to like patterns that you have like that. It could be related to projects. It could be related to relationships. It could be related to whatever it is that is no longer serving you, that's no longer in alignment in your life, to let that die away. It's also the truth teller, so it's going to be brutally honest. I really like the idea of, it strips you down to the bones. Like you see in this card, it's a skeleton, like it strips us down to the bones, the real deep. And that's one thing I love about Scorpio. Like I love Scorpio energy. It's so deep. I don't like skimming on the surface. Like, and Scorpio goes deep down. He's like, I don't want to hear that fluffy stuff. I want to hear like the real truth, like the deep, dark, like, the sustenance, So Scorpio is very much about that, the sustenance. So in the last month, that's the energy that we were working with in the solar month. So there's like all kinds of lessons that come with that, obviously, about letting go of things. And there's a grieving process with that, of course, like a lot of us, it's normal to have a grieving process. So it's, to acknowledge that and to help support us through this understanding, like, and being grateful that the patterns serve us, grieving the things that are no longer, that might come to a surprise to us that no longer fit, and just getting the wisdom of the card and how to go through that cycle. And also the ancestors are very deeply tied to Scorpio energy. So the ancestors, knowing that all of those who have passed before us, all the love that had to be there in order for us to be there now, so like just feeling the support of all of them behind us in our process. And then we go on to, the moon being in Aquarius, which in the tarot is the second card there with the star. And so we see it's a very different energy. There's like a woman, you know, bathing in these waters, and so Aquarius energy is very much about yeah, like there's also a higher concepts in here. There's like a cosmic connection here. Aquarius is the sign of the humanitarian, you know, and so right now the moon is in Aquarius, so maybe we're feeling a little bit more connected to our visions and our dreams, and yeah, in the exalted form, it helps us to bring these visions and these dreams down into, as we see, it's like going from the cosmos down to earth. So bringing these visions and these dreams into reality to serve humanity, you know. So it's very much about that kind of energy of the moon right now. So maybe you're feeling that in this particular moment. And then we're going to go into a Sagittarius season, which is connected to art or temperance. And so as we see in the hero's journey through the archetypes, we'll have death, and then we'll have art. So it's very much about taking all of those things that like, it's like taking from the compost of all the things that are no longer serving us and creating something new from it. So you see there's these elements of fire and water with art. There's this element of mixing two things to temper two things. It's the divine alchemist, really. So it's how do we alchemize these different elements to create something new, you know? There's also a beautiful message with the art card, and yeah, it has to do with, like I said, Sagittarius, about the bigger picture, the bigger perspective. It's also about surrendering. So it's talking about divine co-creation. So you know, when we're trying to make something work and just nothing's working the way that we want or the way that we foresee, it's like to surrender the control, surrender like the idea that like our ego can get it done, and being like, okay, I'm going to show up with all that's alive in me, but the rest of it, it comes from others or the universe, or so it's a co-creation. We're never just creating by ourselves. It's always a co-creation. So this comes with the wisdom of that, where, okay, I'm going to show up with all my things. I'm going to show up in my heart. I'm going to give like what I have to offer, but it's really a gift. I'm offering this. I'm bringing this up, and I don't know how this is going to turn out. I'm going to surrender the control of like how this is going to look, but keep my heart in the vision of like how it feels, or you know, like I'm going to surrender how it looks, but I'm going to stay true to what it is that I'm bringing to the table, and then letting the rest inform me. So like taking it one step at a time, you know, maybe asking for help, or maybe just taking a step back and letting it breathe a little bit. So yeah, really, these cards, just like as a quick little check-in about those cards, that's kind of a bit of the overview of the energies, and how the astrology links to the tarot, and how the different flavors of the seasons will come. So we're coming out of this like deep, like soul searching, like really grieving, maybe like process of the Scorpio season, into a much more like, okay, now that I've uncovered all this, now that I'm really in my truth, now that I've been stripped away of all that's not necessary, like how can I show up with that and surrender it to the divine alchemical co-creative process? You know, how can this, you know, how can I tap into my bigger vision and bigger picture of things? So that's what we're going into. It's going to be a much more like expansive, like yeah, exciting, like fiery, you know, because Sagittarius is a fire sign. It's going to be much more of that energy coming up. So we're getting out of it.
Oh my goodness. That is, thank goodness. I mean, like, there's benefits to going into the Scorpio energy, you know? Definitely. And I don't like being on the surface either. I really like, yeah, let me dive into. But there's a part of me that's like, oh, thank you. Like I've done the work, you know, I've looked at all these facets and these dark places, and now to know that there is something about co-creation. I like that. That feels supportive, and especially that we're going into, you know, the Christmas season also. Um, and in this particular very unique time, it's good to know that there's some energy of creativity and some renewal, and that's coming to us. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Luna, for offering this experience, this reading. And so you're building a webinar to to take us into an experience for a much longer time. So that's on its way, right? Embodied Tarot. Do you want to talk about a little bit about it before we complete?
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, I'm creating a webcast, and it's going to be called the Embodied Tarot. So, yeah, it's just getting to know me a little bit, and I'm going to be doing it at the new moon in December. So, the new moon in Sagittarius on December 14th. So it's a free experience. I'll be giving like a promotional offer to you for those who attend. So yeah, that's a great opportunity to connect. I want to do a new moon ritual. So we'll be reading the energy that's there, and we will also be doing a practice of yeah, planting a seed for the new moon. So like I said, a lot of my work is in conséquence, like with the moon cycles. So we'll be taking the energy of the what the sun is in, and the moon will also be in Sagittarius. So it's going to be like a double a double moment of that. And yeah, I will very likely be. It's still kind of in creation, but I'm intending to bring in a bit of sound and yoga nidra to really get us into a meditative state, to really anchor in our intentions. So it's going to be a whole experience of that. Yeah.
Wow. I wrote it down really quickly here. So webinar Embodied Tarot on December 14th, the new moon. I'm really excited about this. I'm so going to be there. And so for those who are interested, they can go on your Facebook page, Luna Rose Alchemy, and they will get like the information will be there very shortly, right? Yeah, coming up. Cool. So yeah. I'll put this also in the comments so people can just click on the link and there. And I'm assuming also on your Instagram that it will be there as well.
Yeah, I'll announce it on Instagram too. Yeah, and just so people know, what I share on Facebook and Instagram, it's basically the same. But yeah, I just share like my videos of the new moon, the full moon. I give like really fun little oracle card readings, and just like inspiration that has to do with all that.
Incredible. And if they want a personal reading from you, they can reach out to you and message you on these two platforms. Exactly. Great. Good,
yes,
good.
You can message me on those platforms. I really love to give readings around, in congruence with the moon cycle. So, but also just in general, it's really beautiful to connect with you. I've had some really touching tarot sessions, actually, really powerful. So I'd be really, really honored to go with you on that journey and to be a part of your process.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Luna, for being here. I'm really touched, and I love learning and putting the pieces together and demystifying the airy-fairy that seems to have no substance and yet has a lot to offer. And I'm touched by the way that you bring it, you know, into the world, that you offer it. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Thanks, love. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you so much for watching. I highly recommend signing up for the webinar as soon as you can. And also, if you feel called, if there's something, you have questions in your life, or you feel like there are these energetic blocks, you're not quite sure how to move beyond them, reach out to Luna. She's exceptional. I was really blown away by the reading that I had with her. And yeah, you can go on her Instagram, Facebook. I will put these links in the comments for you. And if you felt like this interview helped you to understand more about what tarot, the medicine of the tarot, astrology, moonology, I don't know if you can say moonology, but the moon cycles and how Luna brings that into the world, share it with that one person that you know will be touched, inspired, or will benefit from the information that was given. There's that one person, you know, that you're like, oh yeah, that person needs this. So thank you again. Follow us on Inner Fire Women, the page, the YouTube channel, and on Instagram. And I'll see you very soon for the following interview. Take care.